Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from April 1st, 2022, and I'm recording this on September 29th, 2022. I give you those dates because that's so you know when this information is most relevant. As always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. Each week they put out a list of 10 books that are trending or moving up, that are selling at a rapid rate. And we use those books to kind of see what was going on in the market. And then see how they've been affected since when we do this 6-month look back. So we all make better decisions about what books we chase in the moment when people are really talking about them, and what books we're patient on. In general, it's better to be patient. There are some books that, buck that trend, but for the most part, you're better off if you're patient and don't buy when there's news. But let's look at this week's 17 books between the two lists and see what we can learn for sure. First up, we have Black #1 from 2016. This is a book that's been on and off this list multiple times because it's option and news about it going into production and all this kind of stuff. This time it was because there was a director attached as why it hit the list. Jumped raw copies back up to 25 to 50 plus, where they'd been a couple different times and not sustained or stayed. 9.8s were hitting 175 to 200. And now, once again, we're in a lull on news about any kind of show or adaptation of this series. It's now a $5 to $30 book, 9.8s down to 100. It has turned back into a trap, which it's done multiple times. We've talked about this book. So this one's been a roller coaster, and you want to buy when people aren't talking about it. Next, we have Skybound X #1, or maybe it's Skybound 10. I don't know. You never know if they're say it as an X or 10, but #1 from 2021. This is the first appearance of Clementine. I'll be honest, I don't know anything really about this character, but supposedly there's a 10th anniversary Skybound graphic novel coming, and this character is going to play a role. Raw copies back then were only going for $8. This was kind of one of those, is it really that hot? But there was a lot of sales. Now it's a $5 to $10 book, although the most recent sale was up around 20. 9.8 will cost you 30 to 60, which is why that $20 sale is definitely an oddball. Called it steady. I'll be back. I mean, you can still get it for $5. Just kind of one you just got to pick and choose your spot to get, but not a lot going on with this book at the moment. Next, we're going to move into our covers for the week. And first up, we have Something is Killing the Children, #21, the Frizzen one per store. So Something is Killing the Children was back after its hiatus. They had a bunch of different versions of this Frizzen cover, and people were going for the one per store. They were going 50 to 60 because Frizzen and Something's Killing the Children has a pretty good history of holding value. But this is not the case of this particular book. It's now a $15 to $20 book. 9.8 will only cost you $170 or $75 to $175, so a pretty wide range there. But overall, this has kind of been a dumpster fire. Most of those 9.8 sales, I will say, is on the lower end of that 75, 120. There's just a couple that are above that. This book has fallen way back. Print runs way up on this compared to those early covers that everybody wants and goes after. There were some first appearances here, but this book is not held. Next, we have Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the 25th anniversary. Frizzen 1 and 25, so Frizzen hits the list twice in a row here. This one was also going for 50 to 60 on this 1 and 25, which just over double. Usually I get to triple to sustain, and that was the case here. It's hard to really say. There's only been one sale on this book in the last several months for $50. So at the lower end of this. All the listings are 50 plus. They start at 50 and they go up that are out there, and people just aren't willing to pay it. I call this a down and I'll be back because they're available, but people aren't willing to pay $50 right now. So it's gonna have to start creeping down on the seller side before anybody's gonna probably move on this book. Next, our last true cover of the week, but this is also kind of a first appearance, Comic Buzz. This is Amazing Spider-Man #4 from 2014. The first appearance is Silk, but this is the J. Scott Campbell store exclusive. There's a couple different versions of this. This is the most printed one where she looks in her normal costume. There's like a negative version, like where black is white and white is black, on this as well. Back then, 9.8 of this were hitting $900. 9.6 was up to $500. Now a 9.8 is going to cost you $600 to $750, so it has backed up a little bit. Raw copies will still cost you like $300. You have to watch, there's cheaper sales out there. Those are all Mexican versions of this. But if you just want the cover, that sometimes is a way to get it in your collection without having to pay the crazy prices for some of these rare or highly demand covers that are out there, is you can get a foreign version of that cover for a lot cheaper. If you're just looking for the art, it's still the art. So those are out there as well, but it's not, obviously doesn't have the value of the original version. I thought this one might be worth it because it had been kind of slowly creeping up and wasn't like a big dramatic climb. But no, it's a down and an I'll be back, despite the fact that it really wasn't on there because of news. Next, we have a little comic buzz. This is Amazing Spider-Man number 93. This is the first appearance of Ben Reilly as Chasm, and this is the Gleason variant showing Chasm on the front. Sorry, George, we're to this point. My friend George is a big fan of Ben Reilly and is not very happy with the storyline, but back then, this Gleason cover was going for $10 to $15. Now it's a $5 to $15 book. 9.8 will only cost you $40 to $60. So this is just kind of a down and an I'll be back. A little bit of patience here. Supposedly there's an event coming, Dark Web or something, where he's going to play a big role as Chasm. We will see where this storyline goes from here. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man number 93. This is the Gerardo Sandoval 1 in 25, same book, the 1 in 25. It was only going for 50, so double ratio usually doesn't hold up very well. That's the case here, 10 to 60 on sales on this. So there's a couple sales still in that upper end, but a lot of sales 10, 20, 30 range. So this one's definitely also an I'll be back. 9.8 of this 1 in 25 will cost you around 100 all the way up to 200. So not a ton of sales there, but there is a pretty wide range on those. But yeah, definitely an I'll be back also for both of these Chasm books. We'll see if anything happens with this character. I think December is when that event's supposed to kick off, so maybe November. See if that prompts any movement in these books. Next, we got Batman Beyond the White Knight, number 1, the A cover. So right before this came out, Sean Gordon Murphy went on saying there were print issues, and so there was going to be a shortage of these actually coming out. Supposedly, though, they were going to get them fixed and they were still going to come out, but it didn't stop people from buying these up, making this a $10 to $20 book at release. And none of these are really new characters, but new characters for his universe, his version of these characters. But caused this book, like I said, to go to 10 to 20. Now it's a $5 to $15 book. 9.8 going from 50 to 70. So another book that definitely turned into an I'll be back. But unlike the next book here, that's the same book. This is Batman Beyond the White Knight number 1, the black and white 1 per store variant. Back then it was going for $300, and it was a scarcity issue. They didn't seem like it was truly all the stores got them. People thought they were still going to get them, so I thought this was probably a trap, that if all the stores got them, this would come down. But I don't know if they did or not, but this book still goes for big money. It's now a $500 book for a raw copy. 9.8s are going for $800. This has turned into street cash. Color me surprised. I really thought if they got the printings, 1 per stores don't usually go this high. This one has, and people are continuing to buy it even at these prices. With that, we're going to move into a little bit of Star Wars related info. And first up, we have Star Wars number 43, the first appearance of Lando. And this is basically rumors that they were going to do a Lando show, that they were going to bring back Donald Glover and do a Lando show. Don't know if we've ever gotten confirmation on that, but that's what prompted this. Raw copies were averaging $65. 9.8 was up to $500. Now raw copies are 15 to 90 depending on conditions, so the average is probably more like 50, but it's right in that same range. 9.8s are down a little bit, 350 to 500. So overall, I put this as down, and I'll be back. I thought this one might keep climbing because I felt like it was a little bit undervalued, but like most books this year, it has backed up at least a little bit particularly since we haven't gotten any further news or confirmation on a Lando show. Next, our other Star Wars book is kind of a comic buzz related thing, and that's Star Wars War of the Bounty Hunters. Jabba the Hutt #1, so a long title there. This is the first appearance of Devi Lompop, a new bounty hunter character with colorful hair. She's on some of the variants, so actually I think we'll talk about some of those next week when we do the list. But this week, raw copies of the A cover were going for $5, 9.8 where it's up to 52. Now it's a $5 to $10 book, 9.8, 30 to 50. Sort of steady and worth it, I guess. Not like it had a whole lot of value anyway. We'll see if anything ever happens with this character, but it was a character people were specking on for something back then because there was a 700% increase in sales. With that, we're going to move into a little DC TV or WB TV, and this is Detective Comics 647. First appearance of Stephanie Brown. Spoiler, later she becomes Robin. She's currently one of the bad girls. So supposedly there was casting news for her for the CW show. That usually means it's a trap, and it caused this book to jump up to $30 to $40 back then. 9.8 hit $230. And I thought maybe it'd all be back because it really wasn't that high. Thought the character could support it. Not really. Now it's a $5 to $30 book. I recently got my high grade copy for like 10. No, that was the Hunter's book. This one was like 20, I guess. High grade copy for 20 on the Stephanie Brown. So yeah, 9.8, 225 to 250. So they're still right in the same range. They didn't really jump that much. It was more the raw copies that were really moving back then. But it definitely, on the raw side, turned into a bit of a trap, which is pretty usual. I thought this one might not back up as much, but it did. Pretty usual for the CW stuff. With that, we have a little Sony movie stuff, and this is Marvel Premiere #28, the first appearance of the Legion of Monsters. Back then, they were hitting all-time highs because Morbius movie, and people were thinking maybe Sony would follow up with the Legion of the Monsters. 9.8 hit 10 grand, 9.4 hit 1,000, 8.5 hit 500. Even though it seemed like an odd thing for people to spec on because the rights on these characters were all split up. There wasn't exclusive Marvel rights on some of these, and yeah, it just seemed like an unlikely thing for people to go after, but they were. And now this is backed up, given that the Morbius movie was not very good. 9.8 now was the most recent sale was 5,100, and it's the only recent sale there. But 9.4s are consistently 700, 800. 8.5s, 375, 400. So all of these are all be backs. Raw copies you can get for 50 to 300, depending on condition. But this one definitely backed up. Next, we're going to move into MCU. We have 3 MCU sort of books, and one of those is a book that was on the list last week. This is Marvel Point One, #1. First appearance of Sam Alexander. So this is based on rumors that we are going to get a Nova movie at some point from Kevin Feige. Raw copies were $30 to $50 back then. 9.8 going for $400 to $450. And I thought, that might be worth it. Sam had never really had a big jump that he might sustain. You see kind of what Riri and some of these other characters going for. He's not really that out of line at those prices. But nope, it turned into a trap. Raw copy now goes for $10 to $50. 9.8 going for $175 to $250. So yeah, definitely turned into a trap. But now might be a good time to take a shot on Sam Alexander if you want to spec. Now might be a time to spec, unlike when there's actual news. The next book is Nova #1, which is Sam Alexander's first solo. It was only going for 10 to 15 back then raw, but 9.8 was up to 190. Still, this one actually has kind of been worth it. It's now a $10 to $30 book, depending on sales. Most of them are in the 10 to 20 range, but there's a couple sales on up toward $30. 9.8 going for 150, which is down a little bit. So overall, I kind of just balanced this out to steady and worth it because it's in that same range with a few sales a little higher. So you've done okay. All right, 2 books left. First up, we have Moon Knight #2. Also on the list for the second week in a row, first and only appearance of Dr. Arthur Harrow. And this was based on the trailer. The show had not started just yet. Oh, no, show did debut. Sorry. This is the same price as last week, but an increase in sales. So this was the first episode had debuted at this point. Raw copies were going for $25, 9.8 was going for $250, and this obviously turned into a trap, which all of these MCU shows, related books have done as you've moved away from the show. Now it's a $5 to $15 book. 9.8 only costs you $80 to $100. Yeah, giant trap on this one. And then our last book of the week is a true big boy book. This is Incredible Hulk #1. From 1962, and it was hit the list because it was hitting all-time highs. My little note says a monster, literally, in terms of a book, and that is correct. Back then, an 8.5 hit $250,000. That's still the last sell for an 8.5, so no update there. 6.5 went for $72. Since then, in May, there was a $76,000 sale. So what would it take to even get into this book? Well, a 1.0 is going to cost you $9,500, the most recent sale there. So this is just a straight cash book. This is one of those books that doesn't even really have lulls. Even a book like Giant Size X-Men will have like a lull where you can get into it for a little more, less. This is not one of those books. This is just a straight monster, and yeah, straight cash all the time. So nice to have a true straight cash, but not many of us can afford a book like that. So with that is this week's list. I want to thank you guys for watching as always, and we will catch you next time.